Well, hello, this is Peter Combs from Bidamount.com and Peter Combs Asian Art in Gloucester, Massachusetts. And today is June 5th, 2020. It's Friday, and this is our weekly video, a look at last week's eBay auction results. See what happened maybe over at Catawiki. There's a bunch of new things that came onto the global auction pages this week, especially for the Japanese buyers. Holy mackerel, invaluable. We found some very good auctions. Most of them are in Europe, but Japanese things tend to be small and easy to ship, so you ought to check them out even if you're in the U.S. And Christie's has a sale that just went up the catalog. It's over on the Christie's page on the global thing with some sample images and links to the catalogs and some information. You want to check it out. It's on June 23rd. Some good looking items, and we're going to sort of go through some of them. This isn't a really long video this week because we're getting ready to head up to New Hampshire for a bit, and we'll be doing things up there, of course, while I'm there. But we're a little pressed for time today. So anyway. One of the things I wanted to mention, as I should show you, as I said at the beginning, on the global pages this week, we added a bunch of things, and these items are also featured on the home page for those of you that aren't members, just to give you sort of a sense of what's on there. The other thing I wanted to mention too, before I get into it, this week we added a couple of blogs. One of them was for this auction house that has sprung up down in the area of our old friends in Georgia, a new auction house yet again called Bidit, B-I-D-I-T, and the only known address for them is a house located in the Marietta area, and they had an auction of 50 pieces of Victorian furniture that seemed to go through, but none of it sold. And now they have this sort of big Asian sale in the same manner as Lauren Galleries and Eden Galleries and Roswell Galleries, and all these auction houses are within just a few miles of one another, and all of the stuff has the same sort of suspiciously new look to it. But anyway, you can check it on the blog. And we also decided to put on there, because the people have asked, what's the deal with the auctioneer's report card? And on the blog this week, if you hop over to it and you go in, you'll find the auction for the page about the Bidit auction and a picture of their headquarters, which apparently is this brick rental house. And then the auctioneer's report card is right here. And if you open it up, it'll bring you down to the auctioneer's report card, and you get a sense of what's in it. This isn't the full report card. This is only a fraction of it. There's hundreds of auction houses on here, and we give them all grades and comments about each one to give you our opinion of them. Okay, so we want to check that out. Now, over on the global member pages this week, if you scroll down to it, especially on Invaluable, you're going to find a lot of good Japanese listings, inrows, swords, bronzes, some very good porcelain, some Hirata wares, as well as some enamels, wireless cloisonnés, lots of metals, lots of late Edo and early Meiji period metalworks, inlaid bronzes and so forth. And there's also a lot of good Chinese stuff. For this time around, it appears that Invaluable has more things on it this week than Live Auctioneers, because they do sort of go back and forth. So you want to check that out when you have a chance, if you're using the pages. And this is the Christie's global page, and on it are just a few examples of the things that they have coming up in their June 23rd sale in Paris. Some good bronzes, some very good jades. There's a lot of nice looking cloisonné in this sale particularly, and some good blue and white. And I like their Paris sales because the prices aren't crazy. They have good general stuff, and if you're in Paris, by all means attend these auctions because you can get some very good buys. You really can. And this is the catalog they published on it. It's linked off the global pages. Some nice looking pieces, some very good early bronzes, some Tang figures. As you see, there's a lot of great material on here. And I love this dish. That's a great looking dish. You want to check that out, Chai-Ching period. And then the Annalise jar. And then you have this other big Ming marked vase jar here with the boy's pattern on it. Very attractive, and on. A nice looking jade with its celadon with its cover, and so on. Garniture sets and so forth. It's worth checking out. Do give it a look. Okay, and you can also scroll open their page and go through it that way. Alrighty, now over to eBay results last week. There was this. This was about an 18-inch lime green ground Famille Rose late 19th century baluster jar with its original lid, good looking pot. This was a nice example, and it had a, as I recall, yeah, it had a Yongchen mark on the bottom, which of course is apocryphal, but people like marks no matter whether they're apocryphal or not. And this sold for $968, which for how pretty it was and its size, 18 inches, I think is right in the ballpark. Nice looking item. And then over to this, there were a couple of these pear-shaped bronzes up this week. This was one of them. This was a good one, Ming period. People tend to date these all over the map, anywhere from Song to Yuan to Ming, even early Qing sometimes. And I always think of this particular form being mostly associated with the early to mid-Ming period. And this one did pretty well. It brought $610. Curiously, you're going to look at another one that sold, and I think this one under the radar. I think a lot of people missed it. Though it had a lot of bids. I think somebody was chipping away at bids on this thing. 65 bids and only got up to $610, which tells me somebody was doing $5 and $10 bids just to try to nudge it up a little bit. All right, and then over to this, the Japanese double crane patterned cup. These you've all seen before many times on Arita porcelains of the late 17th, early 18th century. It's a fairly classic pattern and most often found on plates. This was on a cup, and it ended up selling for $403. It was about 1 inch and 2 inches tall. They're not very big, but fairly rare. And this seller was Hugh7873. He only does auctions periodically, but when he does them, he always has great material, and it's either Somatsuki wares or early Arita wares. I believe he's a collector, and he buys and sells to build up his own collection, and he sells off some great things, including this. This was that square Arita dish, 17th century, that we looked at last week. It's got, it's done like a piece of fabric, and you notice how they folded the porcelain before it was fired. Good underglazed blue decoration, nice looking foot rim on it. Here's the back of the plate, but very nice creamy white, milky white porcelain. Did very well. It brought $1,159, which was a good price for that, but it was worth it. And he also had this up, a reticulated transitional period, late Ming wine cup, Openwork cup. These were very popular in the late Ming period, and this was a nice one. And the reticulated work all seems to be in good shape. If you ever get one of these, before you buy it, always check it to make sure the cage work here isn't fractured. There are no lines or cracks or breaks in it, because they're very prone to it. And this cup went for $1,142, which I think is reasonable. That was a nice form, nicely done, and appeared to be in quite good condition, which is sort of unusual for these. And then on to this, the 8-inch Kangxi period Wucai ho-ho bird plate with ascending over the flower beds. This did very well, and part of the reason it did so well was if you look at the enamels, the decoration on this was just in great condition. And the gilding, as you can see here, these big areas of gilding on the floral edges often are very worn down because of use and cleaning and all that stuff, a bath and ammonia to clean the plate will strip that gilding right off. And apparently nobody ever did it to this one. It was well taken care of. And it ended up selling for $1,605, which is a strong price. But the porcelain was in great shape, and it was made between, $1,700 and $1,720. And then on to this. This was one of two. This was a seller, Welcome All Friends, over in the Netherlands. And they had a couple of these Wanli pear-shaped bottles, underglazed blue, well-known export type. A lot of them were brought into the Netherlands. And this was a nice one, and it was in good shape other than the typical fritting and so forth that you find on early Wanli examples. And it ended up selling for $1,674. Which I think was fine. That was a perfectly good one. But the next one up was a bit more desirable because it had the ascending horse out of the light with the lightning, and about the same size as the other one, also in about the same condition, minor fritting and so forth, and in good shape. And this one brought another $600 over the last one, $2,247. And these are not terribly big. How big was this one? 27 centimeters. So it was, it was around about 9 inches, 10 inches tall. All right, and then we flip over here. This is the same seller again. A very nice looking Swato jar. These are not big. In the photos, they always look enormous. This is about a 7 or 8 inch jar, but the decoration was nice. I was on this sort of crackle ground, which is, I think, very attractive on Swato wares. And nice thickly glazed upper section. You see a few glaze gaps where the glaze ascended on the neck, but very typical. And here's a side shot of it. And again, this is a pattern you see on lots of Swato pieces. And later you saw them on Arita pieces and Amari pieces in Japan. These circular, these red, Kinrendi red rondelles. All right, and there's the picture of the bottom, sort of gritty and grungy, and the way that Swato pieces always look. They are trying to copy these days, so you want to be careful. There are fakes of Swato pieces turning up. I think most of them are made in Southeast Asia. I'm not sure, but you want to be careful. But these jars typically are not terribly big. And then again, you have another big Swato charger that was in this particular lot of items that was being sold by Welcome All Friends. Nice. Again, you have this iron red, these iron red rondelles here, and that famous underglazed bluish green that they used on these porcelains. You don't see it much before this period, and you don't see it much after. But this greenish blue enamel was very popular with Swato decorators, and this one did very well. It brought $2,850. All right, but part of the reason is it was in great shape. Most Swato chargers were so heavily used. They have cracks and lines and all kinds of things. And a lot of them are misfired to begin with. That one looked pretty darn good. And then here you have the lamp. I might have added this after the newsletter went out last week. You always want to check in a day or so after the newsletter gets posted, the new one, because sometimes I see things and I just said, oh, I want to that suddenly come up and I want to add them. This was a nice thing. The seller had it as 19th century. It was a rider, an immortal riding a kirin. It is not a foulane. He said it was a foulane. It really isn't. Whenever you see hoofs, you know you're not dealing with a foulane. Foulanes never have hooves, they have paws. This one has hooves and has a scale body. Hooves and scale body means it's a kirin or quilin, depending on whether you're in Japan or China. The quilins are typically Chinese, actually. And this was a nice one, nice Japanese example, but I think it was much older. I think it was probably an earlier 18th century example. That was converted into a lamp. I think the seller was being a little bit conservative. He's a sort of new one here from what I'm seeing. It ended up selling for $870 with only 4 bids, which I was kind of surprised about. I think this was a pretty nice looking thing. And whoever got it, I think got a very good buy. I'd leave it right as a table lamp. It would make a great table lamp. And then on to this. This was our friend Will over in the UK. His seller name was Godrevi. It is this nice 18th century bronze hoof-form vase with archaistic bands around it, and then you have the mask handles, of course, on the ends. Here's a shot of it. Very ferocious-looking foulane mask on this. Really nice-looking one. And I like the fact that they used beadwork, Buddhist beads, instead of just the straight old-fashioned iron ring to finish off the loop handle. It was sort of an unusual touch. And apparently a number of people thought so, because it ended up selling for $2,157. But it was a good-looking pot, nice-looking pot. It came out of the UK somewhere, if I know well. All right, and then on to this. This is sort of a rustic. It's been banged around a little bit. They had it listed as a Han piece. It's not Han. It is later, probably Ming Dynasty. And well, let's see here. Yeah, Ming, mid-Ming, judging by the surface on it. It was a little dented up. The seller listed it as Han. It's not Han. But nice looking pot. And I think somebody got a good buy. $450. I think a little oil, you clean it up a little. It would look very, very nice. And it was under the money. This was one of the great buys of the week. If you missed it, I'm sorry. But this was a highly unusual Ming Dynasty pricket stick, not highly, but quite unusual, with a European figure holding up the pricket stick, which means when you see European figures in Chinese art, you can right away assume that most Chinese mainland buyers are not going to be interested in it. So it's an opportunity to buy something really good for under the money without having to chase it to the moon. And here's the back of the figure. The patina was nice. All of the ribbons and banding and so forth that made up the figure were good. This was around 8 inches tall, as I recall, but very nice undisturbed surface. And it was probably one of a pair originally. These are typically done in pairs, but a good example. And it went for just $640, which really surprised me. I thought that was just a great buy. It was a really good buy at that price. It wouldn't have surprised me if that had brought $1,500 easily. All right, and then on to this, the 100 Boys patch box. They had it listed as Guangxu period, had an iron red mark on the bottom and all that business, but I think it's probably a little later. It wasn't a Guangxu mark on the bottom. It was the Linshi Chengjiang mark, which appeared on Guangxu pieces for sure. It's a little 4-character mark, and you can come over and if you didn't, well, we'll see if we can get it up here, see if it's where it is. There it is. All right. And this mark appeared on Guangzhou pieces, but it also appeared after. And so it could have been anywhere, but the quality of this box was excellent. The decoration of the kids were good. If you always look at the faces very carefully, and you'll see that the faces are very precisely drawn for each child. They're carrying banners and lanterns and Buddhist symbols and so forth. This one's carrying a flower basket. Very, very nice. And ended up selling for $713, which I think is perfectly fine. It was a very, very pretty little box. Really was. Quite unusual. And then over to this, the Japanese 19th century Arita dish with butterflies, and then these sort of, feather or ribbon bandrols coming out and going to the edges and so forth. Very nice looking example, and ended up selling for $407. This was ceramics and collectibles over in the Netherlands. They also sell by the name Shangri-La, and they sell on Catawiki as well as eBay. They have a massive inventory of stuff. If you collect late Ming and Wanli pieces, there's a number of guys over in Europe that you want to get to know, and these are among them. Nice dealers, and they sell under the name of Shangri-La Antiques. All right, and then over here was this 8-inch tall transitional period wood size sleeve vase, 1640s or 50s, somewhere in there. Good looking example, and it was in nice condition. And it went through at $1,346, which is perfectly well within the range that these typically bring. They can bring anywhere. The little jarlets, as many of you know, sell for $600 to $800, and then you get into these sleeve forms, and the price goes up another $400 or $500 or so. And this was a good-looking one, and the iron red on it was nice condition. It wasn't all worn down. Iron red on Wanli pieces, or transitional pieces rather, tend to wear. All right, and this was another piece. This was something that Mark Wahlberg had. It's a Pennsylvania dealer who's been around forever and ever. He's a great dealer. He knows what he's doing. And this was that very nifty little lacquered cricket cage. And if you bother to look at it, here's the front, here's the door, and it has this floral pedal device here. You clutch it and pull it up, and the door will open just like that. And it opens up, and there you have your cricket cage. But it was just a really nice tabletop item, something to enjoy. Almost like a Chinese okamono. It was a beautiful little one. It brought $568, and I think probably because the surface was undisturbed, it had no damage. All the pole work, all the edges were in nice condition on it. It was a good looking thing. And then you had this. This was the other pear-shaped Ming Dynasty bronze that went up. This was a little better than the other one. Had a little better patina and so forth on it, but a nice example. Had a good casting, lots of that sort of thick, gunky patina that these things develop over time from use, and it sold for $1,136. All right, which was a fairly strong price, but not unusual. And then on to this. This was something I added to the newsletter after it went out last week, and I hope you saw it. This was a Tibetan or Inner Mongolian ewer with double jade plaques mounted on each side, which makes it very unusual. Most of these do not have big jade plaques like this, and the carving of the jade was quite good. I figure this is probably an early 19th century example. It was nicely done, inlaid, of course, with coral and turquoise and all the usual stuff. And you'll notice that always with Tibetan silver, it's sort of dark and murky looking. It's because there's a lot of other junk in their silver. They didn't have the sterling, the 92.5% pure, the silver standards that they had in the West. They sort of used silver, and it could be anywhere from 60 to 85 or 90% pure. But this was a very nice ritual piece, very well cast, unbelievably well cast, nice and tight. And in the end, it did well. When we saw it, it was at like $600 or $800. We put it in, and it ended up selling for $6,114, which is not unusual for these. If you check Christie's or Bonham's, you'll find that all the better ones sell between $4,000 and $7,000, $4,000 and $8,000 typically. And not much has been written about them, so I think right now these kinds of objects are relative bargains. Someday somebody's going to start publishing some very serious work on Tibetan and Inner Mongolian silver and how superb they were at their work. And you're going to see a lot of people start collecting these, and things like this will be very expensive one day because it's so elegant. And this was big. This thing was like 20 inches tall. It's huge. All right, and now on to this. This was another piece from Hugh. Was this 7873? Was this Chinese Chenchi ware, underglazed red an underglazed blue dish, and in the famous willow pattern over the lake. You've seen this before. You also see it on earlier Rita pieces. They adopted it as well. But this is more typical of the Ming examples, transitional period examples, and beautifully done. And this did fine. It brought $1,020, and it was only about 6 inches wide. These were not big. These always were sort of small, and they were made for the Japanese market, but a nice one. And then on to this. This is coming up. This is on right now. This was Mark Wahlberg again listed this. This is a very nice little Kogo box, lacquer, seal paste box. With a gilt lacquer and silver, and it looks like mother of pearl all over it. Just an elegant little box. Mark knows what he's doing. This guy's a good dealer. I don't know if you followed him. He for a while he only did mostly auctions, then he did fixed price things. Now he's back to doing auctions. But his descriptions I generally find to be very reliable. And he dates this as late Edo, early Meiji period. So, you know, 1850s to mid 18s, or maybe early 1870s, somewhere around there, I guess. But nice looking box, and it should do quite well. It's got a day to go. It closes on Sunday. It will be in the newsletter page. And then over to this, if you're a Dewa Blanc de Chine buyer, you want to check this out. This is an unusual footed bowl with crabs on it. They have called it an incense burner. I guess you could use it as one, but it has these very nicely done rue head feet on it. But the relief work with the plum blossoms, and then these crabs climbing over the plum blossom trees, I think is terrific. And you don't see that very often. The bottom is nicely finished, nicely glazed. It's got a little bit of edge roughness on it, but a very unusual form. And if you can pick that up for under $300 or $400, you got a heck of a nice buy. That's a good object. It's an interesting object. All right, how many? You know, you've seen enough of the rhino horn form cups. This is a very cool looking incense burner. And then on here also, this popped up, I think last night or yesterday, was this, there are a pair of paintings by this seller. They're framed, they're leaf paintings, probably were in an album at one point. They look to have their original mounts. Nice calligraphy and script, very neat kanji down the sides. And here in this one, there's two of them. They're quite similar. They're listed separately. You can buy them both. But this one has the scholar. There's a scholar studio, and there's a young student carrying some things in, or maybe carrying firewood in, because they often did chores. And it's just went up. It's got almost 8.5, 9 days to go. It's up to $9. Has one bid, and there is another one. And this will also be in the newsletter page this week, okay? So there was a fair bit of activity this week, and the prices remain very good. And now that the lockdown is lifting, I expect to see a lot more stuff get listed. And I think you're going to start to see the more traditional auction houses, the live auction houses, posting more and more stuff, because they're heading into the summer, and a lot of auction houses rely on heavy numbers of auctions during the summer months, especially in areas like New England, things like that. I can tell you they really want the summer tourist people to come in and come to their auctions. But at any rate, we'll see how it goes. All righty, and that's it. So if you haven't subscribed to us yet here on YouTube, please do hit the notification button if you want to get let to be known when we put up a new video each week. We do at least one a week. Sometimes we do a couple, as you know. And come over to Bidamount.com, check it out. Check out the global member page information. Check out the newsletter page, which of course that's free, and so on and so forth. You all know the drill. All right. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.